was the only person of color on the jet bridge. They singled me out. They asked me if I was selling drugs, transporting drugs, what kind of drugs I have on me. It was clearly racial profiling. The experience was humiliating and dehumanizing. It was degrading. I had all the other passengers squeezing by me on this claustrophobic jet bridge, gawking at me like I was a perpetrator when I had done nothing wrong. Definitely did not feel like a consensual encounter whatsoever. When two cops stop you, you don't feel like you have the right to leave, especially when they start interrogating you. The whole experience was traumatizing. I felt belittled. I want to use my resources and my platform to bring national attention to this incident so that it stops.
In a rare moment when you'll see André very serious for very good reason there, as he has a press conference talking about he and fellow comedian Clayton English, how they were stopped at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson airport in both 2020 and 2021 and harassed, searched, questioned, and all of that. Both of them were stopped before they boarded a flight, and they were accused, of course, of smuggling drugs and had their bags searched for that. There's a lawsuit that they're filing against the Georgia Police Department that was conducting this because they have this shady practice, which we're gonna get into the crazy details of how they did this. But also, as Eric Andre was leaving the airport back at LAX, he was also asked about this by a couple of paparazzi out in front there, and he had more to say as he was walking. Let's watch.
So basically, the broad strokes. I'll give you the broad strokes.
Sure.
Never have. I've been detained and questioned 3 times in my life at the airport for drugs. Every time, never had drugs on me. Clearly profiled. I got into the jetway. 2 agents whipped out a badge.
So the jetway. So you went through TSA.
Went through TSA. Went through my ticketing process. On the way to the plane, I had 2 agents whip out a badge. They could be Clayton County. The Atlanta PD denied it. They could be DEA. People are telling me it's Clayton County Police Department. And they were like, "Can we search your bag?" And I was like, "No."
Okay, so
you can't. That's against the Constitution.
He knows his rights. He wasn't the only one, as I mentioned. Clayton English, he was talking about it too. Let's watch.
I'd already gone through security and I already presented a gate agent with my ticket. I was almost on the plane when in the jet bridge, 2 officers popped out, showed their badges, and started asking questions whether I had illegal drugs like cocaine and meth. I felt cornered in that jet bridge and I felt the need to comply. They made me move to the side of the tunnel where they took my ticket and ID. And they asked me questions and asked if they could search my bag. They took my bag and they searched it. It's confusing because I wasn't sure what the issue was. What did I do wrong? And once they actually gave my ticket back and my ID, I was able to get on the plane. But for the next 3.5 hours, I was, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was thinking, okay, maybe I'm gonna get arrested when I land. What did I do wrong? Is this something that normally happens to people? And once I saw Eric Andre's tweet about the situation that happened to him, it immediately reminded me of my same situation. We're fellow comedians. I reached out to him. A lot of people have probably had this happen to them and feel like there's no course of action for them to take, or they just have to let things happen to them. And I think we're here to speak up for those people.
And this is where platforms from folks who are known get a chance to shed light on other folks who don't have those platforms. Let's go into the things that are happening to more people, as English was pointing out there. Because the police said that this is all voluntary, it's random searches. And that the real problem though is there's some cash getting moved to police in this. Here's some details. The purpose of the Clayton County's program is to fight drug trafficking, that states the lawsuit, but drugs are rarely found during these stops, and seized cash serves as a financial windfall for the department. Weird. The lawyers claim that these stops rely on coercion and targets are selected disproportionately based on their race. But the police department refers to the stops as consensual encounters, that's a weird term for it, that are selected at random. Meanwhile, the lawsuit says, records show that the officer seized more than, listen to this, $1 million in cash from passengers via asset forfeitures, which allow law enforcement personnel to seize property that they suspect might have been used in a crime. People usually have to make legal bids to get their property back, and they know how much trouble that is. So yes, they're taking in all this money. Oh, we need it because we're gonna find out what you've really been doing. You can come back and get it later after you go through a whole process, an illegal process here that you probably don't have the time, energy, or money, or know-how to do. Here's a couple more stats, Jordan. Police records from August 30th of 20 to April 30th of 21 show that there were 402 jet bridge stops at the Atlanta airport. of the 378 passengers whose race was listed, 211 of those 378 were black, 56%, and 258 were people of color, 68% of those stopped. That's what the lawsuit says. Out of the 402 total stops, only 3 reported drug seizures. 3 out of 402. And those 3 were 10 grams of drugs from one passenger, 26 grams of suspected THC gummies from a different passenger, and 6 prescription pills without a prescription from a third passenger. That's what the lawsuit reads. 2 of those people were charged. Crazy. It's almost like they're just gathering up people and seeing what they can get from them, and afterwards it's just whatever.
They're just stealing from people. Like, I also don't believe that what the cops say they took, or most of it, if any of it, was actually illegal. Suspected THC gummies, you can't prove it, you haven't done testing. That's it. 6 prescription pills. I travel with a prescription, I don't bring my slip from the doctor, I just keep it in a little bottle. So the same thing would apply. This is totally ludicrous, and it really shows how damaging civil asset forfeiture is in this country. Like, they could just take $1 million from passengers who are doing nothing wrong.
That's crazy.
And like you said, you could file a legal claim to get it back, but that's costly. Then pay for a lawyer to get your money back, and people probably just do a cost benefit analysis and see, oh, this lawyer is gonna cost me more than the money that the police took from me, so they can just have it. So they don't lose more money in the long run. This is totally bogus, and this has to end. I feel bad for Eric Andre. I feel bad for people who have been in this situation before. Certainly there are many, many more. You shouldn't be harassed. You shouldn't be racially profiled just trying to board a plane. I watched his Kimmel interview where he talked about it more, and he's in business class. So it's like, what is, if you really want to, like, and the police definitely police on class-based lines in addition to race-based lines. So when you're pulling someone aside who's in first class, and nobody else in that section, it's only because he's black. This is like totally transparent. So this racist policing, the civil asset forfeiture, the theft from people who are just going about their daily lives, it's just some of the many, many issues with policing in today's society.
And by the way, I've maybe targeted him because he recognized him, things like that. As he said, he's been stopped 3 times, and it's always about drugs. But there's also potentially this. Here's a big piece of information. Because the lawsuit also states that of those 402 stops, that yielded more than $1 million, as we pointed out, from 25 passengers, but only 2 people, the same caught with drugs, were charged. So $1 million from 25 people. That's a lot of money from each one that they would assume. So maybe they're like, oh, maybe there is something about business class, or certain people in business class that they assume maybe have some cash, but also they can get for busting on some drugs. And if they don't, who cares? We'll take that cash. I don't know, that's all speculation, but $1 million from 25 people, Jesus. It's crazy, and hopefully something finally does happen and they change this entire policy, because let's keep it real, it's stop and frisk, and it's specifically targeting people.